Welcome back to Atlas Garage. Today we're working on an 08 Toyota Corolla here. We've got to do an oil change on it, and we've got to check just the bare essentials. Any wear items, anything that might be leaking, anything might need to be refilled. One other thing that I noticed when I popped the hood on this is this battery terminal is corroding a little bit. I'm going to show you guys a trick later on how to deal with that. Really simple, really easy, something you can do just a matter of minutes. Alright, let's get started. First things first, we got to jack up the car so we can get the oil out. I'm going to show you guys a trick on how to identify where to jack up your car. That way you're jacking a car up properly and you're not damaging anything. So what you want to do is you want to come over to the side of your car. The jacking points on a car are going to be right behind and in front of the wheels. In the case of the front wheel, it's going to be behind it. And we're just going to peek underneath here. And I'll see if I can get this to focus. If you can see this is a spot weld on the car, and it's reinforced specifically for the jacking point. If you have to change your tire on the side of the road, that's where you're going to jack from. In the case of us, we're just jacking it up so that we can get more access to the drain plug and the oil filter. Alright, just to give you guys a better idea of what we're looking for, this is the oil pan of the engine. It's warm right now because I was just running the car. This is the drain plug back here. This is the housing for the filter, and this filter housing is different than what I've shown previously on my car. This is a cartridge style oil system. So it doesn't have a screw-on oil filter in the traditional sense, and I'll cover that later when we get to that part. So just like last time, we've got a crush washer on the drain plug, and we want to replace that with a new one. So all you're going to do is you're going to take this off, throw that in your trash can, place the new one on, and then when all your oil is drained out and it's just dripping, you can then go and place this in, and that way you don't forget about it. One thing to make note of when you're reinstalling your drain plug, screw it down hand tight just so that it touches down, and then you want to grab your wrench. I particularly like these ratcheting wrenches. This one's specifically Duralast, so AutoZone provides these. I like them because they've got the selector switch on them. You don't have to flip them over to go the opposite direction. And all you're going to do is you're going to get it to the point where it's tight, and then just give it a little snug. And it's not much. Maybe a little more. And that's all you need. You don't need a lot of pressure on it. You just need enough to get that crush washer to squeeze down just a little bit. Alright, I mentioned that this filter housing is different than the one that I showed you on my car. This is a cartridge style. So this is a plastic housing that sits here. It screws into the engine here. We're going to take this off and I'll show you just what we're looking at there. got our filter wrench, very handy tool to have. We've got it on a 3/8 drive stubby ratchet, so it's very short and you don't need a lot of torque. And that's why we want to leave our catch pan underneath, because the oil is going to come out of there. This is 020 Mobil 1. So it flows like water. Now see, unlike the previous oil filter that I showed you, you've got a plastic cap, you've got an O-ring here that needs to be replaced with every oil change, and this is a cartridge oil filter. You'll find these in other oil filters like the one I showed you on my car previously, but this will not be sitting in there like this, and I'll show you what exactly we have to do up at the bench. Okay, so these are the basic components of this oil filter. You've got the cartridge, and you've got the O-ring. We're going to take this cartridge, and all it does is it pulls out. And toss that away. There is, if you had any serious issues, you can take this and spread the pleats of it apart and see if there's any metal files, or metal shavings, I should say, in between those pleats. That would indicate that there's excessive wear somewhere in your engine. You can do this with other style of oil filters as well, but you have to get a oil filter cutting tool to cut the top off and be able to pull essentially a cartridge out of that, because there is one of these in those oil filters as well, but it's not as easy to get to like this. Alright, so we've taken our cartridge out and we've cleaned out the inside of this filter housing. The next thing we want to do is we want to get rid of the old O-ring, and you can do that with a hook pick like this. And all you're going to do is you're going to stick it under there, and then you can lift up and go around like this, and it'll ride up the threads, and then it just pops off. You can take that, throw that out. Your new one, you're going to want to just stretch it over real slow, careful. You don't want to tear this new O-ring. And you can just walk that down until it's in the groove where it's supposed to go. And then the new filter cartridge just slips on like so. There's a return spring underneath this metal catch, and that's what you're seeing here. The next thing we're going to do, take an oil squirter and just put a light amount of oil on your O-ring. That's a little bit much. You're just going to take that, work it around, make sure that everything's nice and lubricated. Because just like on the other style, you don't want to tear that, and you want it to go in smoothly. Alright, now it's time to put it all back together. Okay, so now we're just going to do the opposite operation. I'm going to put this in, put the oil filter housing in, get it threaded down. All you got to do, push this in, start to thread it in. I'm just going to get that in there. Nice. Gotta put our oil filter wrench back on. Get it threaded down. And once you feel it touch down, and it's getting close, there it is, and that's about it. You don't need to crank on this. If you actually look at the torque spec on this, it's very, very, very minimal amount. Just wiggle your filter wrench off. Get your oil drain back underneath. And just spray down all your areas where you've been working. So now all we have to do is put oil back in it, and then we'll go cover the battery terminal post and what to do with that. Okay, so we've got engine oil in. We'll start the car, make sure there's no leaks. Another couple of things you should always check when you're changing oil. Check your coolant tank. There's usually marks on the side that indicate low and full. Sometimes it's hot and cold. Sometimes you'll have a mark up at the top that says hot, and that's because water's being pushed out of your coolant system into the overflow, and that's your hot mark. So if it's above or below your hot mark when you check it warm, then you either don't need to fill it or you need to fill it. Check your washer fluid as well. That's always important. Back here, it's good to check your brake master cylinder and make sure it's not low on fluid. Check your air filter just to make sure that it's doing good. Make sure that it's not overly dirty, or if it's at the interval that you need to change oil or change your air filter, change your air filter. Alright, now we're going to get on to that battery terminal. Okay, so back to our battery. We've got a 12mm ratcheting wrench. Always, always, always take your negative off before you take your positive off. This is the ground for the entire car. And if you take your positive off first, then anything, anywhere is your, essentially, your power feed. That can cause some serious issues. Alright, so we're going to pull this off, then we'll pull the positive off, and I'll show you what we can do with that. Okay, so now we've got our terminal off. We're going to get it cleaned up. We've got hot water and baking soda. You're going to put about 3 or 4 scoops of baking soda into a cup with hot water. You want to get it really, really hot. And we're just going to stir this up a little bit. Get that going. And then we're going to take our positive terminal here and just drop it in there, and you'll notice that it's fizzing up and it's got this green tinge to it. That is the baking soda removing all of the corrosion off of that. We want to get that off, that way it doesn't spread into the wires on the positive side. I had a truck that it had corroded further and further down into the wires, and the truck would intermittently not start because of it, so that is an issue. I had to replace both the positive and the negative cable on that truck. Okay, it's not fizzing as much right now, so we're gonna pull that out, make sure it's all nice and cleaned up. Okay, so it's taken all that corrosion off of our battery terminal. It's still not perfect, but there are things we can do about that. For right now, we're going to take our battery terminal cleaner, and I like this style of cleaner because it's a plastic housing instead of a metal one, so there's no chance that you can arc this on anything in the car as well. So we're just going to take this, run it inside of here, make sure this area is nice and clean, ready to go back on. We'll just run it through this way as well. It's never a bad idea to do that. Alright, that's cleaned up and it's ready to go back onto the car. Before we put anything back on to the car, we're going to come over here. We're just going to use our terminal cleaner on the battery terminals themselves and get those nice and clean. And all that does is it provides a solid connection for your positive and negative. If you've got poor starting, this is one area you can check and make sure that your connections are good and tight, as well as that they're making a good solid connection. I'm also going to pull this battery strap off and dip this end in that hot water and baking soda mix, and then I'm going to get this cleaned up. I'm going to shoot it with a little bit of paint. That way it looks nice and clean. And we'll be done with this. Alright guys, we are all back together. We've got our terminals back on. We've got our tie down painted. That way it's not corroding away either. You'll notice that the terminals are red. Why are they red? I put some CRC battery terminal protector on them. That'll inhibit the terminals from corroding any faster. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Comment, like, subscribe. Go down there, hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I release more videos. Throw a comment down there. I'd love to hear your feedback. Anyways, thanks guys. Build your tomorrow.